to be able to get it on our YouTube channel in case you have to tear yourself away or if something comes up. We have been successfully recording this for the whole year of Trail Talk. That being said, I am delighted to introduce our guest speaker this evening, Hillary Holt. Hillary is the community learning manager with the Catalina Island Conservancy, and she will tell you about that fine organization. She joined the Conservancy's education department in 2016, having received her master's in zoology with a certificate in ecology, evolution, and conservation biology from the University of Hawaii at Manoa in 2013. Boy, what a great place to go and get your education. She is enraptured by evolution and biodiversity on islands. As the lead of the naturalist training program and the Conservancy's outreach programming, she is dedicated to bringing lovers of Catalina the most current information from the most relevant sources. What a marvelous thing. Hillary, we are just delighted to have you this month as our featured speaker. So with that, I will toss it to you. So welcome.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get going here. All right, thank you for that introduction, and it is my pleasure to be here among fellow hikers and enthusiasts of the outdoors and get to share the breathtaking place that is Catalina Island. And having lived out on the island for 5 years, it really doesn't get old. And so not only are we going to go through hiking the Trans Catalina Trail, but I'll also give you some more information about learning more about the island and getting more involved. And maybe if you're not ready for a 38.5-mile hike, how you can also enjoy the island without hiking the entire TCT, as we call it. And so, as Julianne mentioned, I am responsible for the naturalist training program out on the island and our continuing education opportunities. And so today I'll be specifically talking to you about hiking and tips and tricks, how to get started and hike on the island, and what to expect while you're out there. And so must do my due diligence as a staff member of the Catalina Island Conservancy. I want to tell you about this great organization that stewards the island. And so the Catalina Island Conservancy is a nonprofit that is responsible for 88%, almost 90% of Catalina Island, about 42,000 acres. And so it is a nonprofit that was founded in 1972 by the Wrigley family out of Chicago. So that's the chewing gum and the Chicago Cubs. And it's a much longer story and a good one that I can share more about in questions, and then tell you about you can learn more in naturalist training as well. And so the Conservancy is one of the oldest and largest land trusts in California, and like to make the point that we have 160 some miles of roads and trail. We have an airport. So it's almost a small municipality that isn't run with any tax base at all. It is completely run by charitable donations and grants. And so a real effort has to be made to keep this pretty large organization going. And where I come in, a lot of it is to be talking about the fact that Catalina is home to over 60 plants, animals, and other species that or I guess that they all fall into these categories, but over 60 species and subspecies that are only found on Catalina. And so talking a little bit more about how you can help us record some of that amazing biodiversity out on the island. And Catalina is the only privately owned island of the 8 channel islands. And because of this, has become the most accessible of the 8 channel islands. And so 5 of the 8 are national park islands and 2 of them are Navy. And so Catalina, having the town of Avalon, gets on average, in an average year, about 1 million visitors a year. And so here is a look at Catalina in all of its glory. 76 square miles, 21 miles long, 8 miles wide from Long Point over here to China Point. And as I said, about 60 miles, 62 miles of coastline. And so the Conservancy manages this green section that you can see, that is the 42,000 acres. And this is what was deeded in 1975 by the Island Company, which is a stock-owned company owned by the Wrigley family that then deeded that land. And so when they deeded the land, they kept Avalon, you can see in orange, 2 harbors, and then Emerald Bay and Howland's Landing. They also kept the campgrounds. And so this starts right away in why having the opportunity to give a talk like this is very exciting, because the island is not necessarily straightforward in how to use it, and people can find it complicated going in. And so just a few little tidbits that will help you get started. And one of them is that the campgrounds that are hiked are located, there's 3 of them on Conservancy property and 2 of them on Island Company property. But the major point here is that you have to make your reservations through the Island Company. So there's the Catalina Island Conservancy and there's the Catalina Island Company. And the Conservancy that I'm here representing, that owns the green portion of the island, is a conservancy and manages the land and stewards the land. And the Island Company is doing a lot for the infrastructure of the ecotourism economy. And so I want to just put this number, and I want to talk about this number a lot. You can make your reservations through the website at the Island Company's website, but I recommend you just calling this 310-510-4205 number. It is the Island Company's visitor center out in 2 Harbors, because you have a lot of there's a lot of factors that we're going to go through, and they're so helpful. So just give them a call. And the other reason that I wanted to put the campgrounds on this map before I went any further is just to mention that if you are a Conservancy member, you get half off the price of the campgrounds that are on Conservancy property. So Parsons Landing, Little Harbor, Blackjack. If you have a member card and a member number, or if you even have the number from your sales transaction, they said you're going to call this visitors, and so in order to get that discount, you also do that through the visitor center out here in 2 Harbors. And so some of the time you'll find me talking about the different facets of the Conservancy's mission, which are to steward the land through a balance of conservation, education, and recreation. And today we're going to focus on the recreation component. Before I move forward, just so I can define a few of these other colors on this map, 88% of the Island Conservancy, we say about 10% is Island Company. And then these blue sections are the other 1% that's privately owned. And so whereas the Island Company is stock share owned company, El Rancho Escondido right here is pure privately owned by the Wrigley family themselves. And you can find soon to be open a destination wedding chapel and venue, a wine tasting room. There's vineyards out there, and they're soon to bring back their Arabian horses that they have raised throughout the last half of the 1900s out there. And so then down here is the city of Avalon. So the city of Avalon is an incorporated city in LA County. And so this blue is the municipal land of the city of Avalon. So you'll find LA Sheriff's, the library, the school is Long Beach Unified. And then Two Harbors, it's an unincorporated little village that's totally privately owned. And really the best way to describe it is just a slice at a time. Hasn't changed in a long time and just has a few buildings out there. All right, so before I get into the logistics, I just wanted to really go brass tacks on the trail map, because this is the bread and butter. You can download this PDF off of the Conservancy's website, but I really recommend getting the paper map. When you get to the island, you can get it in Two Harbors, you can get it in Avalon. I'll give you some more details on where, because as could be expected, there is not great service out on the island. So you don't want to be relying on any wayfinding that requires your phone data or Wi-Fi. So getting that paper, very valuable. And so let's just look at the trail really quickly and talk about some of the decisions that you are going to have to make if you want to come and hike the Trans Catalina Trail. So first of all, let's adjust your eyes and see that it's this yellow line right here. You can see this yellow line that goes across the island and dips down here and then actually circles the west end. So that's the 38.5-mile Trans Catalina Trail. And so there's two harbors, there's two options, or two ports, I should say, not to confuse you. There's Avalon, the major city town of about 4,000 full-time residents down here on the southeast end of the island. And then there's Two Harbors, this isthmus that's just half a mile wide, probably about 200 full-time residents. And you can decide which way you want to start the trail. Do you want to come into Two Harbors or do you want to come into Avalon? The majority of people come into Avalon and depart out of Two Harbors. So we'll go into making some of those reservations in a little bit, but just kind of framing the rest of the information. And so then, depending on your schedule and what boat you can get to the island, if you get on a 6 a.m. boat, a 6:30 boat, then possibly you might want to make it out to Blackjack. You might want to bypass Hermit Gulch and head out to Blackjack. If you are on a afternoon boat, I actually am asking you to please don't do that and stop at Hermit Gulch and get a fresh start in the morning. And so that's just your decision. If you're making a plan to come hike this trail, you can hike it in 5 days, you can hike it in 4 days, you can hike it in 3 days. 4 days is the most, is the most recommended. Most, I think, common is to take 4 nights to be able to do the trail, but it's all depending on knowing yourself. And we can look at this elevation chart down here, and this is going up to about 2,000 feet right here. And you can see out of Avalon Canyon, it's really steep. And then once you get out here in this part of the island, I lovingly call it the home of the false summit, that you do go up and down quite a bit before you get out to the next campground. You lose a lot of elevation. So you go by Blackjack Campground, our only inland campground, to the airport, down to Little Harbor, where you lose a lot of elevation, Two Harbors, and then you have the option to make the west end a loop or not. And so you can go over Silver Peak, which is would be the toughest part of the trail, or as some people do, they go out and back on the low road that goes in and out of the coast. So that's just you knowing yourself and how much time you have and who your friends are, or family that you're taking with you. And so another thing I want to mention before I move on is you are not filtering water on Catalina. We really don't want you and don't recommend you to be filtering water out there. The big part of that is you're not going to find many running streams. And so it's mostly going to be reservoirs. And we do have the non-native American bison out there. So it is, and not only that, we have spigots. So let's just talk about how you can get water out of a spigot. So no need to filter it. And so at Hermit Gulch, Hay Press is your first stop that you can fill up water. Blackjack has water. Little Harbor has water. Two Harbors has water. Parsons does not have water. So this is another reason you want to call the visitor center, because you're going to make a plan with them in a reservation, excuse me, for a locker out at Parsons. And then they will drop off water and firewood for you out at a locker. But you have, on your way through Two Harbors, you have to stop at that visitor center and pick up a key. So if I haven't been clear, this visitor center is going to be important in planning this adventure. All right, so you're going to look at this a lot. All right, we got that. So you want to do this. You are looking at some weekends. Okay, I think that I don't have a presentation this week. I don't think I have any meetings on the calendar. So what is going to work? Well, what's going to work is when there's reservations available, because it is a very popular trail. And so I really want to recommend that you get your reservations a few months in advance if possible. They, right now, 2022 campground reservations don't open until the first of the year. So it's basically going to be like a cattle charge, I imagine, when they lift that gate. And so continue to make reservations if you're able through the end of the year. There's some availability in the rainy season, but if you're going to be going out in 2022, be ready, mark your calendar and get on the phone or the website at the beginning of the year. And so if you are camping, you are getting your reservations through the Catalina Island Company, and your hiking permit comes with that campground reservation. If you're just coming to Avalon or Two Harbors for a day hike, you're going to get a hiking permit through the Conservancy, because you'll likely be on Conservancy land. So hiking permits do come along with campground reservations, but if you're coming for a day hike, you need to get a day hike permit through the Conservancy. And this just lets our rangers that we do have patrolling the island know where they can expect to find people and who they should be looking for out on the landscape, to kind of give an idea of where they should be checking up on people. And so to go through these bullet points again here, Island Company, all campground reservations, the rates vary. The Conservancy campgrounds are a couple dollars cheaper, and both of the Island Company and Conservancy campgrounds are about half as much in the off season. And then you can get your excuse me, I misspoke, are a few dollars less in the off season, and then you can get half off the Conservancy campgrounds when you're a member. And so I'm being redundant and slow about this part, and we'll get into a little more fun activity, but just trying to be clear on these logistics, because I know it's really confusing. And again, getting that wood and water reserved and picking up that key in Two Harbors for Parsons. And so then so just to give you a ballpark, in peak seasons, I believe it was the Island Company campgrounds are $29 a night per person, and the Conservancy campgrounds are $25 a night per person. So depending when you go, how many nights you go, and how many people you're going to have with you, one, it's not going to necessarily be cheap, but it is also variable. So you'll have to do a little math, and that will include getting to the island, which they recently increased it a little bit. So it's $76 round trip on the Express. And this also has everything to do with your schedule and when you can come over. And so if you're planning to go through Avalon, Long Beach has the most sailings a day, has the most time options. If you're further south, you can come out of Dana Point, and then so that's the Catalina Express. The Newport Flyer has its own boat as well. But again, the most options you have are going to be out of Long Beach. And then in order to get back and forth from two harbors, you're going to want to be going out of the San Pedro port. So I know some friends have someone's gonna have to help me with the term I'm looking for, but where you leave one car at one port and then have another car at the other port, in case so that you can come in Avalon and then leave out of two harbors and end up in San Pedro and be able to get back to your car. So let me know if I can clarify that. I see questions coming in the chat, but I'm going to resist looking at them, and we can answer those at the end. Unless Julianne or John, you want something pertinent you want to interrupt me with, please feel free to do that. And so then when you're on the islands, you're not actually legally allowed to bring propane over on the boat. So you need to plan accordingly to be stocking up on that once you get to the island. So if you come into Avalon, we have the world's most exciting grocery store. It's been new and improved since I've lived there, and it's really changed the quality of life living there. So there is a Vons, a full-size nice Vons that you can get food and water and of course your fuel. There's also a hardware store that stocks that stuff from you. And I also want to point you to the Conservancy's Trailhead Visitor Center that really caters to hikers. And so it has a lot of the little sundry things that you might find useful that maybe you forgot. And then halfway through the trail, you get to reward yourself with a stop for a hot lunch off a grill at the airport in the sky, and another opportunity to mend your blisters and get chapstick and granola bars and those little things that maybe you want to pick up on the way. An airport cookie is famous out there. And then in Two Harbors, that little village still has one restaurant and a general store. And so expensive as they may be, they are an oasis when you are coming down after a few days camping. So let's adjust your eyes. Suddenly we're zooming in. This is a little bit abrupt, but I want to transition just quickly before I get more into, as we talk about our opportunities to use the island. Let's say that you don't plan, you only have a day over on the island. You're just coming for a day over to Avalon, and you're not someone that's necessarily going to just find your way to the beach bar all day. You still want a little bit of, we call it on Catalina, we call it detox retox, depends which one you want to do that day. But so zooming in on Avalon, if you're not hiking the Trans Cat, again, coming up through Avalon Road here, our most accessible trails on the island are at the back of the canyon. And so this is the Wrigley Memorial and Botanic Garden. And it's $8 for adults to get in. And if you I suppose what I try to tell people is, if you don't fancy yourself much of a hiker, or if you have kids or have anyone with limited mobility, getting just to the top of the Botanic Garden in itself, it's not real steep, but it's steady, and so some people, by the time they walk the 1.5 miles up Avalon Canyon, they feel like they're ready for that cold beverage. But if you want to keep going, you can make this Garden to Sky trail. It's 1 mile up to the ridge, and you can see that you're on top of the Palisades at this point. You're along this ridge line back here. And on a clear day, you can see San Clemente Island. And I mean, when you get up to the ridge line and you can see out to the Pacific side of the island, the windward side of the island, make you really feel like you're on an island. And then you can also make this into a loop. And so I would recommend, so this hike is called Garden to Sky. This one is called Hermit Gulch. And as I was saying, when I was talking to John and Julianne about this, I personally prefer to hike the steep part up. And so if you're going to make this 5-mile loop, this into a 5-mile loop, I recommend following the Trans Cat and right above the Hermit Gulch campground, jumping on the trail here. But instead of following the Trans Cat, you take that left and you make this into a loop, and then you head down the access road. And there's also this mile spur that you can do out here, and it's not a short mile. It's another one of those very undulating, on Catalina, what you'll have, you'll find it's not a park. And a big way that you can tell that is because in an effort to not disturb more land, quite a few of our trails are built on old roads that aren't necessarily switchbacked as to what you might find in some park situations. So anyway, down here in Avalon, there's only about 4 roads. They all lead to Avalon Canyon. And as I just try to let people know, stick to the golf course. Follow you might have a golf cart when you're there, you might rent one, but when you're hiking, you're going to stick to the golf course and follow the road up. And so here is Avalon Bay as you're coming in. And so here's the Catalina Express pulling up to the Cabrillo Mole, and you get off, you walk along here, and the Conservancy's Trailhead Visitor Center is right here, where you can get a lay of the land and talk to staff and gear up, maybe grab food at the Toyon Grill that we have there. And then you can see just about, we call this the flats down here. And then these are up on the hills a little bit, but this is essentially the the road. You're going to follow this right out of town. And that is getting up Avalon Canyon. I also wanted to point out, for those of you that want to spend some time in Avalon, this is the casino that is very symbolic. I feel you see this image a lot associated with Avalon. No gambling ever there. Casino is the Italian word for gathering place, but it's part of Wrigley's legacy. And then also there's the Catalina Island Museum, which really comes highly recommended. And then if you're looking for the party on a weekend, you're going to continue out past the casino, and Descanso Beach Resort out here is the only, I would call, like, beach bar in Avalon. And also because a lot of the front street is, I'm going to call it a beach park. It's kind of a built up beach. So out here in Descanso, you can get to a beach with some surf to play in and hang out in. And of course, rent a golf cart and do the scenic drives, or however else you'd like to enjoy your time in Avalon. So here's our Trailhead Visitor Center that I mentioned that you can stop at on the way. And so a landmark for you to look at. I won't spend too much time on that. And then this is a view from the top of Hermit Gulch looking down. But so that's that ridge you're going to hike up to. This is in greener times. Obviously, I didn't just snap this as is apparent. But this is before when you've gotten finally out of Avalon Canyon and you're starting the Trans Cat. So if you aren't heading back down the Wrigley and Memorial and Botanic Garden, and you're heading off into the hills, into the interior, the wildlands, as we call it, you are going to be taking off towards Blackjack Campground, spending the night. And there's a lot of human history around Blackjack that I'm going to try not to go off the rails too much here. But then you get to the airport in the sky that I mentioned. And so here's a look, an aerial view of the airport. And this is actually Palos Verdes Peninsula that you can see in the background. and this is the runway. And a beautiful location. They call it the airport in the sky for a reason. You get amazing views, a cookie, maybe a beer, depending how you're feeling. And then you're going to leave the shade and the cool, and head on down to Little Harbor. And so this is a very special place on the island. Little Harbor is, so this rock structure that comes out is called the Whale's Tail. Little Harbor is on this side, Shark Harbor is on this side, and then there's a beautiful campground there. And so trying not to show just too many sweeping, beautiful photos and make you have to go, live the experience yourself out there. But Little Harbor could either be your second or third campground, depending on how you planned your trip. And again, there's water there as well. And so then you come down into about 6 miles from Little Harbor over to Two Harbors, some ups and downs. And this is coming into Two Harbors. And so this is the Two Harbor campground. And this is the Trans Cat right here. You're going to come down this hill. So you're coming from Little Harbor, you're coming down this hill, and the visitor center is right behind this. It's like right behind this knoll here. And so stop in at the restaurants. I have to mention the buffalo milk. That's the other famous drink on the island. It's a dessert. It's the best of both worlds. So the campground here, and then over here just out of sight is the USC Wrigley Institute for Environmental Studies. So there is a marine field station out in Two Harbors. And let's say you went into Two Harbors and you just camped for a couple of days. They do have Saturdays at the lab where they will show you the touch tanks and take you on a tour of the hyperbaric chamber, the only hyperbaric chamber that's on the island. And just another shout out there. And so then after you've spent a little bit of time in Two Harbors, you get to make that decision to hike Silver Peak or not to hike Silver Peak. And so this is the road, that low road. It goes in and out, a lot of miles just in and out of those coves, but it's not up and down. So you have to weigh that. And so you can make it a loop. As I said, a lot of people just go out and back on the low road. And a lot of these coves that you see, most of them are leases to either yacht clubs, youth camps. And on the east end of the island, there's also a lot of boat and campsites. And so a lot to take in while you're out there. All right. So now you're going to do this thing. But one of the misconceptions that we suffer from, I think the most, is that people are going to come hike across a cute little island and don't give it the respect that it needs necessarily. And so the absolute biggest enemy to hikers out on Catalina is heat and dehydration and not being prepared. And so just making sure you have enough water, you know your own skills, that you are trying to do as much hiking as you can in the early and later parts of the day, and stopping if you can find. We've tried to supply as many shade structures as we possibly can. In addition, depending on the time of year that you go, the weather can be incredibly variable. At this time of year, it's going to be very cold, but even from the coastline, as you all know, hiking in California, from the coastline up to the mountain, to the top of the ridges, can really swing widely. And so just making sure you are packing those layers, and just being responsible and prepared. And the best advice I can give you is long pants, closed-toed shoes. We have ticks and rattlesnakes and poison oak and all of that great low elevation scrub oak, all those fun things that come with that. I was just actually on a hike out to Cat Harbor Overlook this weekend, and there were 2 rattlesnakes out there. And so it was noon and it was hot. So, I mean, you have to be just situationally aware there too. And luckily, because they were on the trail, you know, they were really visible and easy to get around with no trouble. And so taking care of yourself, first things first. And don't forget that there is a free roaming herd of American bison out on the island. And so there's a little under 100 right now. And so you could be lucky and see them exactly the perfect distance away, you know, one ridge line, just perfect enough for you to stop and look at them, but them have no access to you. Or you could come across the whole herd across the trail. And this is the only time that we either recommend backtracking to a road and waiting for a ranger, or doing your best to get around the herd. Never walk directly or split a herd. And if you do have to walk around them, one, watch out for cactus. There's a lot of it. And I hope you don't have to do this, but try to hike uphill. The likelihood that they are going to charge uphill is much less than downhill. And I also want to say they're prey animals. They don't want to be upset. But if they're looking at you and they're agitated, then this is just what we don't want to happen. And so giving them that 125 feet of space, and also this energy with the binoculars and the zoom lens, they feel that energy, as opposed to trying to keep your eyes down and keep your presence. We do on the website have full bison safety sheets available, and by and large, you know, as long as you're being vigilant, like some of the issues that we have are people with zoom lenses that don't know how close they are, people hiking with earbuds in and surprising them. So again, just that situational awareness. And then once you feel safe and prepared for yourself, the reason that it's exciting of all the reasons to give these sorts of talks is that this educational component is what bridges the mission of the Conservancy for it to be an island that people can recreate on while we're trying to conserve the land. And so asking people that are coming out to the island to please take care, leave no trace principles, just like you always do. You're packing it in, you're packing it out. But the added little tidbit there is that no, we don't have bears, but we do have wildlife that will absolutely get into your food. And so we do have animal proof garbage cans, as well as food lockers. And most of it's for the ravens, which are pesky, as we know, everywhere, but also our endemic dwarf island fox that we know will come in and they will get into backpacks, they'll rip things open. And yes, they're not scary like a bear, but it really is for the health of the animal. This is a federally threatened animal that we know will, if it's tempted to come into campgrounds, then this is where diseases are passed between the animals. It breaks down their social structure because they're very territorial animals. And so just please do your best not to tempt them, both by purposely feeding them or for accidentally feeding them by leaving your food unattended. And my segue there will be that if any of you are boaters, or maybe you have friends that do boat to the island, the population of the Catalina Island fox crashed down to under 100 animals in the 90s because a stowaway raccoon brought canine distemper virus over to the island. So we're asking people to check your boats for all stowaways, to check your gear for seeds, keep your dog on a leash. And I have a cute little video that we're just going to take a moment. I think it's about a little less, it's a little more than a minute here. This was produced in partnership with the Channel Islands National Park. And we had them edit the part that says keep your dog on a leash, because we're the only island that you're allowed to take a dog onto at all. So that's the only difference here. So enjoy this little cartoon about how to take care of the island. Oops, I went to look at the chat. It doesn't want me to. And it is an initiative that we're continuing to work on, because biosecurity on Catalina is a really tricky topic, because the ports we don't own, the Conservancy doesn't own the ports. And not only that, it's a really porous island, meaning people can drop anchor and come on from all sorts of directions. And so just trying to get some of that outreach out there. And so spread the word on protecting a place with so many special and unique species. Let me move on. All right. So what else do you expect to see while you're out on the island? And so you've got water, you've got food, your boots fit and are broken in. You are ready to take this thing on and see a lot of exciting things out on the island. And so we have 5 species of small mammals, and the ones that you're most likely to see are our dwarf Catalina Island fox, which only get up to 4 or 5 pounds. And so we have giant island ground squirrels that have gotten larger than their mainland counterpart. And so sometimes you almost confuse them for each other. And what I want you all to know, that if you see a small mammal that isn't a cat, a mouse, or excuse me, mice are out there too, but a cat, a fox, or a squirrel, if it's not a cat, a fox, or a squirrel, if it's a possum or a raccoon or any other small mammal, please report it to us. And so then I mentioned the rattlesnakes. Keep your eye out. They are the Southern Pacific rattlesnake. There is a Catalina Island rattlesnake, but it is on the Catalina Island that's in the Sea of Cortez. Just some trivia, and it's a rattleless rattlesnake. And then one that's very likely for you to see, we've already talked about the bison, which are very exciting. The California mule deer that's out on the island. And so Catalina is the only island, only channel island with large non-native herbivores on them. And so not only will you see these deer, but I bring this up also to let you know that you're going to see restoration efforts on the part of the Conservancy protecting plants from these animals. So there's cages around a lot of our restoration areas, larger fenced in areas around plant communities, because back to these special endemic island species, they have evolved over time to not have this pressure of these herbivores. And so a lot of our endemic plants on the island are deer candy, almost literally attracts them very heavily. And so What you can expect to see on the island is very much what you would see in Southern California with our chaparral community. We do call it island chaparral because we have so many endemic plants mixed in, species of mahogany and manzanita that are Channel Island and island endemics. We do have other great communities of white sage out there, white sage, black sage, and our this coastal sage scrub plant community heavily marked by prickly pear. It is, in some circles, in some botanical circles, I've heard Catalina referred to as the cactus island among the Channel Islands. Another reason for boots and clothes and long pants. And so then, and here's our endemic mountain mahogany, which I chose out of all, there's so many species I could choose, but this is actually the rarest shrub in North America. There's only 6 that still occur in one canyon on Catalina. And of course we're propagating them, but you know, just evidence of what is being kept safe out on the island. And this is just a little shot of walking down a road on the Trans Cat that you'll see walking through some of the scrub oak habitat there. And so then I'm going to start winding down here by just letting you all know about the opportunities to get involved in the island. If you're not ready to go hike and want to have a more leisurely experience, or you just want to pick and choose the parts of the trail you hike, you can take our Wildlands Express shuttle. It leaves from the visitor center in Avalon, and it will take you up to the airport and down to Little Harbor. Right now, there isn't a leg between Little Harbor and Two Harbors. So, but the island company does have a speedboat in the peak months that goes between Avalon and Two Harbors. And then also you have the opportunity to take a guided eco tour with one of our trained naturalists and go off-roading and behind some of the gates that a lot of other tours, because there's other tour options that you could take, but we own the land and the gates, so you can see a little bit more. And the benefits of being a member with the Conservancy, of course, right away, you get the 50% off the campgrounds, but friend level, which is the lowest level Conservancy membership, is the same as a bike pass. So if you're a mountain biker, or if you like to bike, you get your bike pass by getting a Conservancy with the membership. We also have a lot of discounts with businesses throughout town, unlimited access to the Botanic Garden, and other member perks such as hikes. It was a member hike that I led in Two Harbors this weekend, and we also have a members book club as well. And so then the naturalist training program, if you are curious about learning more before you head out to the island, the naturalist training program has 3 different levels. The Naturalist 1 is a free online, it's just 2 about half an hour long videos that give you from the beginning of time and geology through the cultural history into how the Conservancy is managing the island now. Naturalist 2 is a 7-hour field trip, and the Catalina California Naturalist program works with the course that was produced by UC Davis to create a 40-hour 4-unit community college level course that you can take. And so you can visit our website to get involved in that. But even more importantly for you all, this is where I'd almost want to ask for a show of hands, is how many of you know of iNaturalist or already have iNaturalist downloaded? Because we only have a few botanists, a few wildlife biologists on staff. And so to have people boots on the ground recording the biodiversity on the island, our land managers really do use that information. There are apparently 30 to 40 rare plants on the island that haven't been seen, mostly because of lack of the manpower out looking for it. And so I encourage you in all your endeavors to download iNaturalist, and it helps you learn and also helps document what you see around you. At the end of every month, we have our last Friday lecture series. And so this month we will be talking about groundwater, but just more opportunities to get involved and learn about not only the island, but about Southern California. And so this is White's Landing here, and with a beautiful view for you, and out at one of our shade structures at sunset. And so with that, I will see what questions you all have for me and how well I can do at answering those.
Well, Hillary, that was just stunning. What a wonderful presentation. A lot of things have come up in the chat. I wanted to start with Carla's one of the final questions. Talk about the best time of year to hike the Trans Cat.
Yeah, I mean, the fringe seasons are really the best. You kind of want to it gets really hot and it gets really rainy. And so if you can kind of gamble right up against rainy season when maybe the crowds are a little lower, or get just right off the couch right when the weather breaks in the spring, before it picks up. I don't know if you just feel like this about in general in California, but on Catalina, I always felt like there was like hiking season, and then there's when you get in the water, and a lot of that has to do with the amount of rattlesnake activity. I'm just not ready to go get on the trail in July as eagerly as I am. And so, the best I could say, probably March, April, if you get in before spring break, and then down here after Labor Day. Right now really would be a great time if there was availability.
Right. Just noted, Julie Garner just noted she hiked the Trans Cat in December, and it was a little rainy and perfect. And I'll put in a personal attestation. I was there just before the pandemic, February of 20. And again, it was moist, but it was just lovely. It was green and lovely. Really nice time to go.
Yeah, I guess the only caveat I would have, anytime you can kind of make it pass if you don't mind a little rain, except dang, that middle of summer, I would just not recommend.
Right. Before we get to the whole list of the questions, I did want to talk a little bit about kind of getting over to the island. You touched on Catalina Express. You touched on the $76. What's the earliest and the latest boat, say, out of Long Beach? What, in terms of our planning, is there like a 7 a.m. boat, a 6 a.m. boat? Is there an 8 p.m. boat to come back?
Great question. So when you go to the Catalina Express website, you're going to look at the schedule and fares, and it's going to show you 2 drop-down menus. One is going to be, when do you want to go? And it's going to show you a range of like 3 different date ranges. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you get on that drop-down menu and you're not in September and you're not in December, that you're in, whenever, right when you want to go, and then making sure you're out of the right port. And so the boats that go over to the island definitely vary by season. There's the most in the peak seasons, and then they drop off. Also in the peak seasons, you're more likely to have later boats. Early boats out of Long Beach during the, so let me see, for a while over the summer, it just switched from 6 a.m. and now it went to 6:30, but I think that it keeps either a 6 or 6:30 out of Long Beach throughout the year. And then at certain points, like you can't get back after 6:30 at night. Like, so just really looking ahead, because let's just put as not the rule, the exception is that schedule varies greatly.
Okay, and then just one more thing. if a group of us were to go over, so we successfully navigate Catalina Express, we go out of Long Beach, which is the biggest port. Can we just walk into the visitor center there in Avalon, the Island Conservancy Visitor Center, and pull our permits to hike? How would we do that as a Sierra Club group, or do we have to get it over the phone or online beforehand?
So you can go to the Conservancy's website, which is right there, and it will say, get a permit on the website, and you can actually, and I don't know what the maximum is, but you can do one permit for a group or several people. Like it'll have a drop-down menu that says how many people are hiking where, and then it'll have a drop-down menu for what trail will you be on. And so, I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't know if I've ever registered a whole group on one permit, but I believe it's possible. Or you can send individual people if they want to just everybody make their own. You can do it right on your phone, not even at the visitor center, because they'll just take you to an iPad, or they'll have you go to the website to do it. The best part is that there might be some Wi-Fi there that you'll be able to get on though. And you also, I mean, I hate to whistle blow on my organization. That's not really the right term, but there's a really good likelihood that no one's going to stop you ever and ask you for a permit. The big thing about the permit, one, is it makes you look at the safety information. So we want everybody going through and reading that and clicking all the, yes, I've read what is out there. And also the rangers get the information that there's going to be people in a certain area. So.
Okay. Just in a nutshell, can you talk a little bit about the Wrigley family and how they came to own the island? It's just such an interesting history. Yeah. And I think people would be intrigued.
Yeah. So let's see, how far do you go back? I think that in some ways, the history of the West can be boiled down to when the Trans Continental Railroad was finished, because the first person to buy the island officially was George Chateau from Michigan. He headed out there and he bought the island and he started the town of Avalon. Mm-hmm. And then the Banning brothers of Banning, California, put George Chateau out of business essentially by owning the Wilmington Transportation Company, and they had a monopoly on the boats coming back and forth. And so there's more to it than that, but essentially Chateau went under. The Banning brothers had ownership of the island, and between their real estate and their transportation and there's several different business ventures that they had going, they started the Santa Catalina Island Company. And so they built up the infrastructure of Avalon through the 1910s. And then Avalon, I think, was incorporated in 1913 or 14. And that's another side story about how they were trying to get around prohibition. And anyway, so then there was a fire in Avalon that burned about a third of the town, and the Bannings basically couldn't recoup their losses. And that's when William Wrigley, who already had business in Pasadena area, saw the island and said he was never going to let it go. This beautiful place. And he bought in 1919, William Wrigley Jr. bought out the majority stock interest of the island company from the Bannings. So not all of it. The Bannings held on to a couple percents for a while. And so then it was basically a cowboy rancher paradise through the 1900s. The goats probably came with the Spanish. The mule deer, the pigs were brought out in the 20s and 30s. The bison were brought in the 20s. So there were some looks at having being like a big game reserve for a while. And then we are so appreciative that the Wrigley family made the decision in 72 to create the Conservancy, and then in 75 to deed the land with the goal to keep it open to the public, that it was really meant not to be locked away. And that's still today the big driving thing of the the mission of the Conservancy is it is where conservation does meet recreation still. So
I have a question.
yeah.
When I visited about 27 years ago, I was told there were feral pigs that were a problem. Do you still have feral pigs?
No, the pigs were removed. They started with the goats and then went back for the pigs. But they were moved through the 90s and they were gone by 2004. And a lot of people, I've only been associated with the island for a little over 5 years. But there's locals there that very much can testify to the island coming back. We still have the non-native mule deer, but yes, getting rid of the goats and the pigs for the island was very important. It was hard for it wasn't well received, as you can imagine. That was a controversial decision, but they're gone.
Yeah. What a fascinating place. Just in terms of flora and fauna and kind of a hiker's paradise, because I thought it was just a beautiful, just the area around Avalon, even if you're there for the day, what a gorgeous hike. Just you could see both sides of the island when you're above the botanic gardens, and then just the history of the island and kind of greater history of Los Angeles. I came across a photo. This is just a personal aside, but my grandparents were married in 1926, and there was this photo of them in the mid-20s where they're dressed to the nines. They came across from LA on I think they call it the Great White Steamer. It was a famous boat at the time, and I think there was a series of big dance bands and people would go there to have kind of a busman's holiday and dancing at the casino.
Absolutely.
And they were there in their little 1920s. My grandmother had her cloche hat and her long beads like a flapper, and my grandfather was in his Stetson and his long coat. They just were having a great time, and it was such a piece of Los Angeles for just ordinary people. Just great history starting at that time, I think, for greater Angelinos. And then
recommend there's still events that go on at the casino. I mean, we're having, I think Jazz Tracks was last week, and we have the Conservancy Ball, and they have, there's a lot of things, but it really does still have that Art Deco 20s, vibe that you can still kind of get back to that feeling.
Well, and the hiking is rigorous. It's not just a pleasure walk. It is a pleasure walk, but you get your exercise, which is nice.
So one of the, let me I don't know how, let me just go back. This is just kind of a funny story, I guess. I thought I had one where I didn't have the campgrounds all over it. Maybe it's on this one that I don't have the campgrounds. Regardless, let me show you. So out here at Hay Press, you can jump off and it's just this little 2-mile loop. And if you notice up here around Hay Press, you're kind of on a plateau. You're on like this high plateau on the island. And it's just this, you go out to this vista and a little loop. So I had told people, because relatively for Catalina, that is a fairly simple hike. And then I had somebody come back and be like, how dare you tell me that was easy? Like that is. And so I try to be a little bit more careful because it is relative, right? Like, yes, for Catalina, but it's still arduous.
Well, the views are stunning. And pack your snacks, folks, because we were like, when we did this little hike a year ago, February, we were like feasting on the gummy bears and peanuts because it'll burn calories. But wow, what a reward. It was just stunning.
That's a really good point, though, about the seasonality is in the winter, as we kind of know, it's a little bit clearer. And so if you want to get the really clear, crisp views of the mainland, hiking more in the winter months makes that more likely.
Yeah, super fun.
Mhm.
In terms of if a group like ours wanted to do an outing, and get there nice and early, do a loop hike to kind of orient ourselves to the Avalon environs, what would you recommend that we also see and do for the, in the afternoon after lunch? I remember a fine museum, which was your art museum was very interesting, and I seem to recall the casino had some exhibits. There was a very interesting history of tile, which for those of us that have quirky histories of LA art, Catalina tile is kind of famous. So
Yes.
could you have some suggestions about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was really close to a good list that you just gave, but you know, getting the museum is a great one. You can do tours of the casino. Underneath the casino, there's a dive museum, which is really very fascinating in terms of just like, I think he owns an example of like most iterations of dive equipment through time. There's the Green Pleasure Pier that you can get out and go get fish and chips out there. There's just, I think, spending time on Front Street in the shops, of course, and just that ambience is, was someone say that word? Why doesn't that sound right? Ambiance, ambiance.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm
Okay,
not
right.
saying it. Is a big pull. And if you get over into Descanso, and so then to rep some of the island companies activities that they have over there, you can rent kayaks, you can they have a falconry experience where you actually like put on a glove and they'll like let a hawk fly to your hand. The first time that I did that, I had these dreams about this talking owl that I could command. Anyway, I thought that was a trip to be able to do that. They've got the zip line over there. They have their aerial adventure course. So there's a lot of activities that you can get into, and our botanic garden as well. We just put in some new interpretive signage, and
Yes.
that's another great one, as I already mentioned. Yes, for the hike, but also we have, it just gives you that feeling of being out of town and kind of into what it's like to be in the hills and, in the back of the canyon without having to actually get out of the canyon. So
Well,
if I think of anything else, I'll definitely jump in with it.
kind of fascinating about your gardens, though. We noticed Mrs. Wrigley, I guess, was responsible, and it was kind of that same era where the woman that put together Joshua Tree as a national monument was big on gardening and arboretum. And I know that Huntington was big with a lot of these women that were sort of society women
Yeah.
in that era, and they were pouring their energies into this sort of activity. So that memorial garden is interesting, and I think the same sort of thing. Women who were really fascinated by arboreta and botany and botanic gardens.
Yeah, about 70 of the large, more impressive and expensive specimens were preserved from Ada's original collection back there. And so, yes, not only is the Wrigley Memorial, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of stories to tell, certainly.
And the tile work on the memorial is really interesting.
Little urban legend for you there. You know that if you get to the top of the memorial, there's three, what would we call those? I guess tombs, crypts. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they were where Wrigley and William and Ada's kids were supposed to be buried. And actually Wrigley himself isn't there anymore. He's in Oak Glen Cemetery. for what it's worth. But anyway, it's considered buried treasure because knowing that they had to break the tile in order to put anyone in there, they housed and staged a lot of that tile in those alcoves so that very expensive tile is just hiding behind those walls. They've actually like ultrasounded the walls and like they can and like have seen it. Anyway, trivia.
Yeah, the great 1920 stuff, because I work pre-COVID times anyway. I work at LA City Hall. It's the same thing. LA City Hall was built kind of around the same time, mid 1920s. And all that tile work, I don't think from Catalina per se, but from some of the companies that were coveting Catalina and eventually bought Catalina, the company that made Franciscan ware. Anyway, I can go off on these massive tangents, which our audience may or may not be interested in. This has been a wonderful talk, wonderful talk, Hillary, and I just so enjoy it. So just to recap the trail itself, if someone wanted to do the entire trail, it's about a 4-day, it looks like about a 4-day adventure.
Yeah, yep, that's right. And so, as I said, if maybe you're getting a late, to me, the reason you have 5 days is you got on that 5 o'clock boat and you ended up staying in Hermit Gulch, or maybe you wanted to stay a second night at Little Harbor, but really Blackjack, Little Harbor, and see that's what people will often do is do Blackjack, Little Harbor, and Parsons and not stay, they'll come in Avalon and not stay in Hermit Gulch, and then they'll finish in Two Harbors and not stay at that Two Harbors campground. So it all depends, again, on you looking at that elevation, at you knowing your own abilities and how fast you want to go. Something I didn't mention that I was going to mention that we talked about is we have a gear haul service on the island that's called Catalina Backcountry. And so if you want to just be hiking with day packs, then you can get this gear haul service to take your heavier packs and stuff for you, as well as they'll bring water and wood and things up for you as well.
I had a real quick question in regards to which direction to hike the trail. I know some people go east to west, some people go west to east. What is your recommendation? Where are you going to see the best views? Because you're not doing a round tripper. So which one is going to give you the best views?
I think I'm partial to going east to west because the island, you feel like you're getting deeper into the island, I think, as you get over to Two Harbors, and because by the time you've left Avalon and you're getting out into the interior, and then Two Harbors, Avalon seems like this huge metropolis that you've left behind in some ways. And so getting to get over to that side of the island and spend more time in that direction, as opposed to, I don't know, as hikers, it seems like we're trying to get to our destination sometimes, as opposed to enjoying along the way. And I recommend east to west. I can't sum it up in so many words, but I think just the way the experience builds on itself is most captured that direction, since the east end can be slightly more impacted as well by some of the pressures and fires and stuff. So that's my recommendation.
Hillary, we had another question come in. What in a nutshell is the history of Indigenous peoples on the island, and perhaps more recent history as well?
Yeah, let me start with recent. So the Conservancy, we have 2 separate MOUs, memorandums of understanding, both with our education department and our conservation department, with the Gabrielino Tongva are in the LA Basin and the Southern Channel Islands. It's the Chumash that are on the Northern Channel Islands. And so then the Tongva word for Catalina is Pimu. And so this group calls themselves the Pimu Catalina Island Archaeology Project. And so it's this, they're volunteers essentially, but it's a collaborative of archaeologists. Several of them are Tongvan themselves that we work closely with on any of our educational materials, and of course with conserving the landscape, because at this point they say they have enough. Unfortunately, Catalina has a very long and deep history of looting on the island. And so the major point they want to make is that if you pick up an artifact, it loses so much of its story and so much of what they can learn from it. And not only that, but they have enough artifacts. And so if you do see something, an artifact on the landscape, please leave it alone, cover it up if you can. iNaturalist, even offline, even on airplane mode, will geo-reference your photo, and you can report it to me or the Conservancy. And so I think their real message is to let people know that any narrative that makes it sound as though the Native Americans or the indigenous folks disappeared, that they are still around. And yes, trying to relearn some of their traditions. But also it's my job to not tell their stories for them always necessarily. And so if you all do take the naturalist training, you'll see that there's resources that we provide that allow them to tell their own stories as well. But in a nutshell, the oldest evidence that we have on the island is between 8,000 and 9,000 years for the Tongva. And again, this is evidence because we know on the Northern Channel Islands, there's evidence of people as far back as 13,000 years ago. But because Catalina is the only island that's subsiding, some of those village sites might be below the surface of the water. And there's been a paradigm shift recently in the idea that maybe the original indigenous folks didn't come across the Bering Strait, though some did maybe at some point, but they call it the Kelp Highway theory, in that we know that the Tongva and the Chumash used wooden canoes and were a marine waterfaring people. And so this idea that they would have come from Asia along the coast where there's otters and abalone and that same assemblage of food. And maybe because the water levels were 300 feet lower, it's thought now, let me get to my point. It's thought now that it's very likely that people colonized the islands before the mainland. And
Wow.
we know about the history of the indigenous people in the Fox and that relationship. And so again, deep and wide, many stories.
Wow.
Yeah, almost
Wow.
all
Wow. That's
Catalina-
huge.
Yeah,
That
almost
is, that's
all of
fabulous.
Catalina is a cultural site. It's everywhere. So you're likely to see midden, which is
That's huge.
the kind of the refuse or the evidence of old village sites.
Yeah.
Little Harbor is actually.
Oh, don't
where
let
we
me
have our
forget.
oldest evidence.
You
I'll be quiet now.
No. Don't let me interrupt. I was just gonna say, I had just remembered you have a separate building, the Catalina Island Conservancy headquarters, kind of up the road from Avalon, toward the memorial, and is that open now?
So there's two. If you knew us,
Is that side open?
yeah. So if you knew, I don't know if it. So there's as I'm just going to be clear, there's the visitor center that's on Front Street. And then if you knew us, even 3 years ago, before the visitor center opened, we have on Clarissa Street, but still in town. It's that big, it's like a old bed and breakfast that used to be kind of the front or our headquarters. That's now just offices. But I think what you're talking about is when you get almost to the back of Avalon Canyon, we have our nature center before the garden, and the nature center isn't open yet.
Right. Oh, I see. Okay, so it's just the new visitor center, which is beautiful.
The new visitor center.
There, right. Okay, got it.
Mhm.
Okay, John, Carla, Marianne, do we have any other questions for Hillary?
I don't.
Before we let her go after a job well done.
That was a great talk. Great talk.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Well, Hillary, it's been fabulous. Yeah, outstanding. Kelp Highway. I just love that. I want to hear more about that. Right, right. All right, everyone. Let's give Hillary a big round of applause. Yay. So thank you for your time and your knowledge. Just fabulous.
Well, I hope
Wonderful.
some of these names turn up at
and,
a naturalist screening.
Yes, absolutely. And we hope to start having our outings and being over on the island after the first of the year, at least I do. Plug for next month, Hillary, and I hope you can join us for this too, because it's going to be fun if you get back over this way. John, as he mentioned, is a veteran mule packer, mule trip person, and he's going to be presenting the third Wednesday of November, as always, the third Wednesday of the month. So that will be November 17th at 7 p.m. Our own John St. And everyone, thank you for joining us and listening to Hillary's presentation. So for me, good night for now, and hope everyone enjoyed. I know I did.
Me
Thank
too.
you, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.